The courtroom holds its breath. Morning light streams through tall windows, turning dust motes into fragments of gold suspended in silence. The marble floor gleams like a mirror. Mia Reynolds stands alone at the defendant's table in a borrowed black dress 2 sizes too large, the fabric hanging from her shoulders like a shroud. Her hands grip the table's edge so hard her knuckles have turned white. Her dark hair is pulled back so tightly it pulls at her temples. Her eyes are the color of storm water, grey-blue and hollow from 3 months of sleepless nights. The gallery is packed. Mahogany benches creak under the weight of spectators and press, cameras ready, pens poised over notepads. In the front row, Catherine Mercer sits in a cream designer suit that probably costs more than Mia's entire wardrobe from the last 5 years, her posture perfect, her expression arranged into a mask of wounded innocence. 3 rows back, Tyler Brennan sits with his arms crossed over his chest, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. His teeth are too white. His cologne reaches across 15 feet of courtroom air. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a silver chain, adjusts her papers and looks down at Mia. "Ms. Reynolds, I see here you've waived your right to counsel. Is that correct?" Mia opens her mouth. Her voice, when it comes, trembles like a candle in the wind. "Yes, Your Honor. I cannot afford an attorney. I have $200 to my name. Everything else burned." The gallery erupts into whispers. Catherine Mercer's lawyer stands. He is the kind of man built entirely from money, 6'3", tailored suit in charcoal that costs $5,000, cufflinks that catch the light, shoes so polished they reflect the courtroom ceiling. His name is James Whitmore, and he has destroyed 47 cases like this without breaking a sweat. "Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. Over a 6-month period, this woman stole $85,000 in jewelry and cash from the Mercer residence. We have documentation, security footage, and testimony from household staff. This was not a desperate act born of need. This was calculated, methodical theft." He holds up photographs. Diamonds. Emeralds. A Cartier watch. Cash stacks bundled with rubber bands. All of these items were found in her possession or traced to her accounts. The defendant lived in a studio apartment in Dorchester on the family's property, an arrangement made out of generosity by Mrs. Mercer. And this is how she repaid that kindness. Mia's hands are shaking. She touches her pocket where the prayer card sits, worn, creased, the only thing she still has from her mother. $200. That is all that stands between her and absolute nothing. Not enough for a lawyer. Not enough for bail if the judge decides she is a flight risk. Not enough for hope. The judge looks at Mia. "Do you have a response, Ms. Reynolds?" Mia stands. She is 5'4". She weighs 112 pounds. She has not slept more than 2 hours a night since her arrest. Everything about her looks breakable. "Your Honor, I did not steal from Catherine Mercer. I would never." Her voice cracks. She swallows. Tries again. "I have no attorney because I cannot afford one. I have no witnesses because I worked alone. But I am innocent. Everything they are saying is a lie." Whitmore sits down with the satisfied expression of a man who has already won. That is the moment the heavy courtroom doors swing open. Every head in the gallery turns. The sound of hinges moving through air carries weight, carries warning. Footsteps echo against marble. They are unhurried, measured, deliberate. The kind of footsteps that do not ask permission to enter a room. Nicholas Castellano walks down the center aisle. He is 6'2" with shoulders broad enough to block out light. His suit is charcoal, expensive but not ostentatious, the suit of a man who does not need to prove anything to anyone. His white shirt is open at the throat, revealing the kind of chest that comes from decades of discipline, of control. His dark hair is silver at the temples. His eyes are the color of storm clouds, penetrating and ancient, the eyes of a man who has seen the worst of what humans are capable of and found nothing surprising about it. A scar runs from his left eye to his cheekbone in a thin white line, a blade mark, old and healed. Gold rings sit on 3 of his fingers. A watch that costs more than a house catches the light on his wrist. 2 men flank him. Carlo, built like a mountain in a navy suit, his face expressionless. Gino, younger, with a neck that suggests he has broken things with it. Behind them, 3 more men in identical dark suits stand near the doors, blocking any exit. The prosecutor's face drains of color. Catherine Mercer's hand goes to her throat. Tyler Brennan uncrosses his arms. Nicholas walks down that center aisle like a general surveying a battlefield. He does not look at anyone until he reaches the defendant's table. Then he stops 3 feet from Mia Reynolds, and in front of God, the judge, and every camera in Boston, he drops to his knees on the marble floor. His men exchange glances that carry entire conversations. In 15 years, they have never seen this. His voice, when he speaks, carries absolute authority even from his knees. It sounds like thunder wrapped in velvet. Your Honor, this woman saved what I value most in this world. Every charge against her is false. I have proof. I have documentation. I have people who will testify under oath. I have security footage that shows exactly who stole from the Mercer residence. And it was not Mia Reynolds. He stays on his knees. The courtroom is so quiet you can hear the clock on the wall ticking. The second hand moves. Once. Twice. 3 times. Mia stares down at this man she has never seen before, kneeling before her in a courtroom packed with press. Tears slide down her face without permission. But what Mia Reynolds did not know was that this moment began 4 months ago, in a place far removed from courtrooms and justice, in a place where rain fell like a curse and neon light turned the darkness into something electric and strange. Now, let us go back to where everything began, to the night when an invisible woman learned that being invisible does not mean you do not matter. The November wind carried the smell of burning wood and loss. Somewhere in the city, smoke still rose into the darkness. And in that same darkness, on the other side of Boston, a man who had never shown mercy to anyone learned what it meant to choose differently. In the sprawling, restless city of Boston lived a young woman named Mia Reynolds. To the wealthy family she served and the hurried diner she navigated, she was nearly invisible, just another girl trying to survive in the margins of other people's lives. She inhabited the spaces between other people's happiness, the converted closet in a Back Bay mansion that cost more than most people earned in a decade, a room so narrow that when she lay down to sleep, her shoulders nearly touched both walls. Every morning began before dawn. The alarm on her phone, cracked across the screen from a fall 3 months ago, buzzed at 5 o'clock. Mia did not reach for coffee or water. She reached for her phone and checked her bank balance first. $847 remained. She had been saving for 2 years toward a studio apartment, first month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit. She needed $3,600 total. At her current rate of saving $150 per week, she had 4 more months to go. Possibly 5 if another expense arrived unannounced, which it always did. She dressed in the darkness. The closet barely contained a shelf for her 2 work uniforms, both navy blue, both worn thin at the elbows from washing. She pulled on the first one, the fabric stiff from air drying in this room where no heat seemed to reach. The single window, maybe 2 feet across, looked out onto an alley where trash bins overflowed onto wet pavement. Winter was coming. She could feel it in the way the rain had started to carry cold. By 5:30, Mia climbed the narrow back stairs of the Mercer residence toward Ava's room. The child slept in a space that was larger than this entire closet, with a white canopy bed that caught light like a cloud, and shelves lined with toys Ava had forgotten how to play with. Mia opened the curtains gently. Outside, the city was still dark. Still asleep. Still unkind. Ava stirred beneath her quilt, her small face turning toward the morning that had not yet arrived. She was 7 years old, with her mother's delicate features and her father's serious eyes. When she saw Mia, her whole face changed. "You're here," she whispered. Not a question. A confirmation. "I'm here," Mia said. She sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to disturb the perfect arrangement of stuffed animals. Time to get dressed for school. Ava's small fingers reached out and found Mia's hand. Will you braid my hair like you do? Of course I will. They sat together in the half-light, Mia's fingers working through Ava's blonde hair, dividing it into 3 sections, crossing left over right, right over left, building something beautiful from what she had been given. Ava was humming a song from a movie she had watched, something about a girl who wanted to be something more than what the world expected her to be. When the braid was finished, Ava reached back and touched it. Then she turned around in Mia's lap, wrapped her arms around Mia's neck, and whispered something that broke Mia's heart into pieces she would spend the rest of the day trying to reassemble. I wish you were my real mom. Mia closed her eyes. She breathed in the clean, sleepy smell of this child's hair, this child who belonged to someone else, this child whom she loved with the kind of desperate fierceness that people without custody rights are not supposed to feel. When she opened her eyes again, she was smiling. Your mama loves you very much, Mia said softly. She is lucky to have you. It was not true. Catherine Mercer seemed to view her daughter as a beautiful possession that required minimal attention. But Ava did not need to know that yet. Ava needed to believe that her mother loved her. That belief was the only thing keeping her small heart intact. The morning ritual continued. Mia dressed Ava in the school uniform that had been laid out on her dresser, navy skirt, white blouse, navy blazer with the school crest embroidered on the pocket. She packed Ava's lunch in a container the size of a small suitcase, a sandwich on organic bread, cut into triangles, a container of berries, almonds, a juice box, 2 cookies that cost more than Mia's daily food budget. By 7 o'clock, Mia had returned to the main kitchen where Catherine Mercer sat in her silk robe, drinking coffee from a porcelain cup so thin it seemed like it might shatter under the weight of the liquid. Catherine did not look up from her phone. Ava is ready, Mia said. Catherine waved a hand dismissively. She was on a call. Something about the book club. Something about Marianne not understanding the thematic complexity of the novel selection. Mia stood in the kitchen doorway for another minute, then turned back toward the hallway. She would walk Ava to the car. The driver would take her to school. Mia would clean the house. The cleaning took 4 hours. The Mercer residence contained 14 rooms, and Catherine had a habit of moving through them like a kind of beautiful, careless hurricane, leaving behind glasses with lipstick marks, magazines fanned across tables, her clothes draped over chairs as though they had simply fallen from her body and she could not be bothered to pick them up. Mia followed in her wake, restoring order to chaos that would be recreated by evening. By noon, Catherine had called Mia into her study. On the mahogany desk, a desk that cost more than the down payment on that studio apartment Mia dreamed about, lay a white glove, and in Catherine's other hand, she held it aloft like a weapon. The guest bedroom, Catherine said. Her voice was not loud. It was worse than loud. It was cold, conversational, the way you might discuss the weather. The shelf above the dresser. I ran my glove across it this morning. Mia looked at the white glove. There was dust on it. Barely visible dust. The kind of dust that existed in the space between perfection and the real world. Catherine examined the glove with the expression of someone who had discovered something deeply offensive. You are responsible for every inch of this house, Mia. Every inch. I pay you $400 per week. That is not a generous wage, but it is what you are worth. And what you are worth depends entirely on the condition of this property. Do you understand? I understand, Mia said. Then I will be deducting $50 from this week's pay. The dust will be removed by tomorrow, or I will deduct another $50. We are clear. Mia nodded. She could not speak. She was calculating. $847 minus $50 equals $797. Her timeline had just shifted. 5 more months instead of 4. The studio apartment that had felt possible now felt impossible again, always receding like a horizon you could walk toward forever and never reach. By 6 o'clock, Mia had finished at the Mercer house. She changed out of her uniform into clothes that were slightly less worn, grabbed her bag, and took the bus across the city toward Beacon Hill. The Beacon Hill Hotel restaurant occupied the ground floor of a building that smelled like old money and older wood. She arrived at 8:30 for her 9 o'clock shift, which meant she had 30 minutes to arrange her face into the appropriate expression of friendliness and to prepare herself for 4 hours of carrying other people's dinners to their tables while her own stomach remained empty. The manager was Tyler Brennan. He was 34 years old, with a kind of practiced handsomeness that came from expensive hair products and a gym membership that was probably more important to him than his own mother. He owned the restaurant floor the way a general owns a battlefield. Everything happened under his watch. Everything served his interests. At 9 o'clock, Mia tied her apron around her waist and stepped into the dining room. The restaurant was half full, couples on dates, business associates having dinner meetings, one table of 4 businessmen celebrating something loud and enthusiastic. She was assigned to that table. She took their drink orders. She brought bread. She returned with glasses of wine that they had not ordered but that Tyler had suggested anyway, adding the cost to their bill. The meal progressed. Steak, seafood, sides of asparagus and truffle potatoes. The men grew louder, their laughter filling the small dining room, their voices carrying the particular confidence of people who believed the world would always make room for them. When their plates were empty and dessert had been declined, Mia brought the check. One of the men, the one with the silver watch and the wedding ring he wore loosely, placed cash on the table. Bills. Real paper money. She saw him place it there. She watched his hand release it. $40. The tip sat on the white leather folder containing the check. Mia cleared the table carefully. She had learned to be invisible in the way she moved, the way she breathed, the way she existed in the margins of other people's moments. She picked up the folder. She picked up the check. She did not pick up the $40 because she did not want to draw attention to the fact that she had seen it. She turned to walk toward the register. Tyler appeared beside her like a shadow that had learned to walk. His hand touched her elbow. His grip was not rough, which somehow made it worse. Table 12, he said quietly. His breath smelled like the whiskey he drank when he thought no one was looking. I'm keeping their tip. You didn't work that table hard enough. Mia looked at him. She did not pull her arm away because pulling away meant confrontation and confrontation meant schedules changed and schedules changing meant no shifts, which meant no money, which meant the studio apartment moving further away. Those customers left that tip for me, she said. Her voice was steady even though nothing in her body was steady. It's mine. Tyler's fingers tightened on her elbow. You want to keep this job, you shut your mouth and walk away. I control the schedule. One complaint and you're gone. No reference. Nothing. Understood. She understood. She understood perfectly. She was nobody. She was less than nothing. She was the kind of person that people like Tyler Brennan could take from without consequence, because nobody was counting what he took. Nobody was keeping score. Mia said nothing. She turned and walked toward the register. Behind her, she heard Tyler's footsteps moving in the opposite direction. The shift lasted another 3 hours. More tables. More invisible work. More money that did not entirely belong to her leaving her hands and entering someone else's pockets. When the last customers had left and the chairs had been stacked and the floor had been mopped, Mia took off her apron at 11:45 and walked out into the November night. The wind had picked up. It carried the smell of the harbor and the smell of burning leaves from somewhere distant. Her umbrella, which had survived 2 years of use, finally broke, one of the metal spokes snapping when she opened it, so that it hung useless against her shoulder like a broken wing. The rain fell on her hair, on her jacket, on her shoes that had begun to develop small holes near the toe. She walked toward her studio, the one-room space that was barely larger than her closet at the Mercer house, and she calculated numbers while the rain fell. $847. Minus 50. Equals $797. 6 more months. Possibly 7. The studio apartment that she had seen in a listing 2 months ago, a real studio, with a bathroom that was actually separate from the kitchen, and a window that looked out onto a street instead of an alley, was still available. The landlord had shown her photos. The rent was $1,600 per month. She could make it work. She could make anything work. She just needed more time. As she climbed the narrow stairs to her room, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. She knew what it would say. Another bill. Another small financial catastrophe. In her experience, the only thing that came in the evening was more weight to carry, and she was already carrying everything she could hold. The fluorescent lights of the Beacon Street diner hummed overhead like the dying breath of something already dead. Mia Reynolds sat in the back booth, her wrist wrapped in an ace bandage that she had bought with money she didn't have, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The clock on the wall read 3:47 in the morning. Outside, November rain streaked the windows in diagonal lines, turning the neon open sign into something that looked less like an invitation and more like a warning. The black and white checkered floor stretched beneath her shoes, shoes with holes near the toe, shoes that were slowly falling apart the way everything in her life was falling apart. She had $200 left in the world. Not 200,000. $200. She knew this with the precision of someone who had counted it 7 times in the last 6 hours, spreading the bills across the shelter's thin mattress like tarot cards that all predicted the same future, disaster. 2 weeks. That was how long she had until court. 2 weeks to find $85,000 for a lawyer who might convince a judge that she hadn't stolen the Mercer family's diamond pendant. She had never stolen anything in her life, but Catherine Mercer was a woman who understood that guilt and innocence existed on a spectrum determined entirely by who had money and who did not. Mia had neither. The diner door chimed. The sound cut through the static of the radio playing somewhere behind the counter. Mia didn't look up. She had learned long ago that looking up only invited conversation, and conversation required energy she no longer possessed. But she heard footsteps, measured, unhurried, the kind of footsteps that belonged to someone accustomed to taking up space. 3 men. She could smell the rain on them, that metallic October-turning November smell mixed with something else. Expensive cologne. The kind that cost more than her monthly rent used to cost. They took the corner booth. The one with the view of the entire diner. The one where you could see everyone and no one could see you unless you wanted them to. Mia kept her eyes on her coffee. The waitress, Jenny, who worked the night shift because she had 2 kids and a husband in jail, brought them coffee without asking. She knew them. Or at least her body knew to be careful around them. The way she moved, the way she didn't meet their eyes, the way she didn't linger. These were things that Mia recognized because she had spent her entire life learning to make herself invisible around powerful people. But the man in the corner booth was looking at her. She didn't have to look to know it. She could feel it the way prey feels the presence of a predator, not through eyes, but through some primitive part of the brain that screams danger and survival in the same breath. She wrapped her hands tighter around the coffee cup, which provided no warmth but provided the illusion of having something to hold onto. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. The radio played a song she didn't recognize. A couple stumbled in from the street, soaked and laughing, ordered pancakes, left an hour later. A delivery driver came through the kitchen entrance, carrying boxes that smelled like vegetable oil and salt. Jenny refilled the corner booth's coffee without being asked. And the man kept watching. Mia's heart had learned to beat in a strange way over the last 3 weeks, in quick, anxious flutters, like a bird trapped inside her ribs. She had developed a tremor in her left hand that she couldn't stop, a physical manifestation of the way her mind never stopped calculating. How much did a judge cost? Could she work 3 jobs instead of 2? Could she sell her mother's ring, the one piece of jewelry she had left, for enough to make a dent? Her mother's ring. The prayer card was in her pocket right now. Burned at the edges from the fire that had taken everything else, still readable, St. Joseph, protector of workers and the poor. Her mother had carried it for 40 years. Mia had found it in a plastic bag the firefighter handed her, singed but whole, a miracle in ash. A miracle wouldn't save her now. The man in the corner booth stood. He was tall, 6'1", maybe taller, with shoulders that stretched the expensive black coat he wore. His hair was dark, silvered slightly at the temples, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds. When he moved, everything about him was controlled, deliberate, the way a general surveys a battlefield and decides where the bodies will fall. He walked toward her. Mia's breath stopped. Her hand shook visibly now. The tremor traveled up her arm. She didn't look at him. Instead, she looked at the coffee cup, at the way the cold liquid reflected the fluorescent light like a mirror showing her nothing but darkness. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and solid like an oath. "Your wrist." It wasn't a question. Mia's injured wrist, broken 3 weeks ago when she had caught Ava falling from the playground structure, when Catherine Mercer had called her a nobody and meant it as a statement of fact rather than an insult, lay on the table in front of her, still wrapped in the bandage. The swelling had gone down, but the pain remained. The pain was permanent. Everything permanent, it seemed, was painful. "I'm fine," Mia said to the coffee cup. "You're not fine," the man said. His voice didn't change. It remained steady, certain, the voice of someone who was accustomed to being right. "You were fine 3 weeks ago. Something happened. You broke this wrist saving a child who isn't yours. Then you lost your job. Then your apartment burned. Then you found yourself sleeping in a women's shelter and working double shifts at a hotel where your manager has decided you owe him something you're not willing to give." Mia's eyes snapped up. The movement was involuntary, shocked out of her by the fact that he knew. He knew all of it. The specificity of his knowledge was more terrifying than anything else could have been, because knowledge at this level, detailed and accurate and complete, was power. "Who are you?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper, shattered like glass. "Someone who has been watching you make impossible choices for 3 weeks, he said. He did not sit down. He did not ask permission. "My name is Nicholas Castellano. And you are going to tell me what you need." The diner fell silent around them. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of it, the kind of silence that happens when people understand that they are witnessing something that should not be witnessed, something that exists in a category outside their comprehension. Jenny had stopped moving behind the counter. The couple in the booth had paused mid-bite. Even the radio seemed to have lowered itself to a murmur. Mia's mouth was dry. She knew this name. Not personally, but the way you know names that exist in the margins of regular conversation, whispered in certain contexts, associated with things that people did not discuss in daylight. Nicholas Castellano. There were urban legends attached to his name. Dark ones. "I don't need anything from you," Mia said. But her voice betrayed her. It carried no conviction. It carried only exhaustion. "Then why are you sitting alone in a diner at 3:47 in the morning with exactly $200 to your name and 2 weeks until a court date that will destroy what's left of your life?" He sat down then, across from her in the booth, moving with the fluidity of a man who had never once been uncertain of his right to occupy space. "You need an attorney. Attorneys cost money. You don't have money. Therefore, you need something." The prayer card in her pocket felt suddenly heavy, as if it were made of lead instead of paper. Mia's hands began to shake harder. She folded them together, trying to contain the tremor, trying to present something that resembled control. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "I'm nobody." Something flickered across his face, a movement too quick to name, too brief to fully comprehend. "Because the people who hurt you believed you were nobody," he said, his voice dropping lower, becoming something intimate and dangerous at once. "And because I've spent 15 years learning that the people who give everything they have to people they're not required to love are the strongest people alive. Catherine Mercer called you a nobody. Tyler Brennan tried to own you. But you broke your wrist for a child who wasn't yours without hesitation. That's not nobody." He placed a card on the table between them. Just a phone number, printed on black cardstock. Nothing else. "Call that number when you're ready to fight," Nicholas Castellano said. He stood, buttoned his coat with a single deliberate movement, and walked back to his booth where Carlo and Gino waited in the kind of stillness that only armed men could achieve. Mia sat frozen, staring at the card. The phone number seemed to glow against the black background, like a lifeline thrown from the deck of a ship she hadn't even known was passing by. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside, she picked up the card with her uninjured hand and slipped it into the pocket where her mother's prayer card lived. She didn't know that at that exact moment, in an office downtown, Nicholas Castellano was making a phone call. She didn't know that Carlo was listening on the other end, hearing orders that he had never heard before, orders that contradicted 15 years of precedent and protocol. She didn't know that her life had already begun to change, that invisible hands had already begun moving invisible pieces, that the game was already in motion. All she knew was that for the first time in 3 weeks, she wasn't entirely alone. The courtroom doors swung open with a force that made everyone turn. Rain dripped from the marble floor in small pools, tracking the path of 3 men in black overcoats. Nicholas Castellano entered first, Carlo and Gino moving behind him like shadows with substance. The prosecutor's face drained of color. The judge looked up from his bench, irritation flickering across his features before recognition struck, and irritation transformed into something closer to caution. Nicholas walked down the center aisle between the wooden benches. His footsteps echoed against the stone floor, each step deliberate, each step a countdown. 50 people watched. Catherine Mercer turned, and her hand gripped the edge of the prosecution table so hard her knuckles went white. Mia saw him coming. Her breath caught somewhere in her throat and refused to move. Nicholas stopped 3 feet from where she stood, and then he did something that would be discussed in courtrooms and coffee shops and family dinner tables for years afterward. He dropped to his knees on the cold marble floor. The gallery gasped, a collective intake of breath that sounded like a knife cutting through air. Catherine's lawyer stood so quickly his chair scraped backward with a screech that made people flinch. Carlo and Gino remained motionless, but their eyes betrayed the shock running through them like lightning. In 15 years of running operations, collecting debts, commanding loyalty, neither of them had ever seen their boss kneel before anyone. Nicholas looked up at Mia's face from his position on the floor. His voice, when he spoke, carried absolute authority even from that impossible angle. Your Honor, this woman saved what I value most in this world. Every charge against her is a lie, and I have proof. The judge blinked. And you are? Nicholas Castellano. I run certain operations in this city. The judge knew exactly who he was. Every judge in Boston knew exactly who he was. Mr. Castellano, you cannot simply interrupt a court proceeding. With respect, Your Honor, I can interrupt when an innocent woman is being framed by fraud so obvious it insults the intelligence of this court. Nicholas stood, brushing rain from his knees with the casual grace of a man who had never doubted he would rise again. He produced a tablet from inside his coat and handed it to the bailiff. Security footage from the Mercer residence. Unedited. Every angle. Every timestamp. The bailiff handed the tablet to the judge. His Honor's expression shifted as he watched. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 20. When he looked up, the calculation in his eyes had crystallized into certainty. This shows the defendant herself removing the jewelry and cash on the dates in question, the judge said quietly. While her husband was away. Divorce proceedings, Nicholas said. She was hiding assets. Staged the thefts to justify access to the safe deposit box. Catherine lurched forward. That's impossible. You couldn't, how did you? Nicholas turned his gaze to her, and she went silent as though he had physically placed a hand over her mouth. I own the security company your husband hired. Every camera. Every angle. Every night for the last 18 months. His attention shifted to Tyler Brennan, who had already started moving toward the rear exit. Too late. You. Stand up. Tyler froze. Every muscle in his body went rigid. He remained seated, his jaw moving soundlessly. Stand up, Nicholas repeated, and this time the words carried the weight of a command that could not be disobeyed without consequence. Tyler stood. You have been stealing from the hotel for 18 months. Skimming tips. Falsifying hours. Running a harassment racket against female staff members. I have signed statements from 6 other women. I also have documentation proving that you and Mrs. Mercer coordinated this frame against Ms. Reynolds 4 days ago at the Royal Bar. You were promised $15,000 to testify falsely. The prosecutor was writing furiously. Catherine's lawyer was no longer writing anything. He was staring at his client as though she had transformed into something other than human before his eyes. Cell phone records, Nicholas continued. Bank transfers. All admissible. He turned back to the judge. I can have them submitted within the hour. The judge banged his gavel. All charges against Ms. Reynolds are dismissed immediately. Mrs. Mercer, I strongly advise you to stop speaking. You will remain for questioning. Mr. Brennan, you as well. Bailiff, please escort them both into custody. The courtroom erupted. Catherine stood, her cream Chanel suit suddenly looking like the costume it was. She pointed at Mia with a hand that trembled with rage. You think you've won? You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. A ghost playing pretend at being human. Mia's voice, when she answered, came from a place deeper than fear, deeper than exhaustion. It came from the place where she had learned to survive on $17 and prayers. I would rather be nothing than be you. As bailiffs moved toward Catherine and Tyler, Tyler bolted. He made it 3 feet before Carlo stepped into the aisle like he had always been standing there, blocking any possible exit. Tyler collapsed to his knees, begging, his words tumbling over each other in a desperate prayer that no one was listening to. A prayer with no one to answer it. Guards took him first, then Catherine, who screamed about lawyers and rights and conspiracies as they led her toward the holding cells beneath the courthouse. The gallery began to empty. People whispered. Cameras flashed outside where news crews were already gathering. Mia stood alone in the center of the courtroom, the prayer card still clenched in her right hand, the one that had healed, the one that had learned to hold hope again. Nicholas approached her slowly. He removed his coat, cashmere, black, worth more than 6 months of her former salary, and draped it over her shoulders. The fabric was warm and smelled like cedar and something else, something that belonged only to him. You were visible the entire time, he said quietly. Everyone in this city saw you. They just needed someone to help them look. Over the next 72 hours, Nicholas Castelliano orchestrated a systematic disassembly of both villains from the fabric of the city they had believed themselves woven into so securely. Catherine's arrest happened at dawn. FBI agents arrived at the Mercer mansion with a warrant that read like a criminal encyclopedia. She was pulled from bed in silk pajamas and led to a waiting vehicle in front of neighbors who stopped on their morning walks to stare. Ava watched from a third-floor window, confusion written across her small face, until a social worker gently guided her away. Catherine faced federal fraud charges, witness tampering, perjury, and insurance fraud. The sentence recommendation was 40 years minimum. Her assets were frozen. Her reputation, which she had cultivated for 37 years, disintegrated in approximately 48 hours as the story spread through Boston's wealthiest circles. Friends stopped answering her calls. Charitable boards revoked her membership. Her daughter was placed in emergency foster care, though 3 days later, Nicholas arranged for Mia to become her temporary guardian while matters were resolved, and within weeks, a judge granted Mia full custody. Tyler's erasure was quieter but more absolute. Nicholas made a single phone call to a man named Marino who owned the hotel where Tyler had stolen and harassed and lied. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. That night, as Tyler sat in his apartment above a convenience store, watching television and pretending the day had not happened, 4 men in black suits arrived at his door without knocking. They did not speak. They did not need to. Tyler screamed as they dragged him from the apartment, but no neighbor came to his aid. No one wanted to become the person who had seen something in this city. He disappeared from Boston that night, and a month later, someone reported seeing him in Alaska working the fish canneries, his face scarred, his eyes constantly moving, always watching for the shadows that had learned to hunt him. He never returned to Boston. He never returned to anything that resembled his old life. Justice, Nicholas had learned long ago from watching his brother's betrayal tear through their family, was not death. Death was too quick, too easy, too merciful. Death was the mercy given to people who had earned nothing but erasure. What Nicholas delivered instead was complete and systematic destruction, Catherine in federal prison, her daughter safe with the woman she loved, her reputation and wealth and future all reduced to ash. Tyler in perpetual terror, looking over his shoulder for the rest of his life, working jobs that paid nothing, living in fear that one day the men would come back. Mia walked out of the courthouse into November rain. The sky was the color of old steel. Wind moved through the city like something searching. Nicholas stood beside her with an umbrella held over her head first, before his own, rain streaming down his face while her shoulders stayed dry. Carlo and Gino watched from the steps, and in that moment, they understood something fundamental about their boss that changed how they served him from that day forward. She was no longer nobody. Everyone in the city now knew her name. The fluorescent lights hummed above them like an electric prayer. 3:30 in the morning. The diner was empty except for the two of them, rain streaking the windows outside, turning the November darkness into something alive and restless. Mia sat across from Nicholas in a vinyl booth, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold an hour ago. She was not drinking it. She was holding it the way someone holds something precious, something that might disappear if they let go. Nicholas watched her over the rim of his own cup. For months had passed since the trial ended. For months of Tuesday nights and Thursday mornings and Saturday shifts at 3 in the morning, when the diner belonged to them alone. His lieutenant, Carlo, no longer followed him inside. Gino stood outside now, patient in the rain, giving them space that neither of them had asked for but both of them needed. The neon sign outside cast everything in shades of blue and electric pink. It made the world look unreal. Mia looked unreal, like something he had imagined during a dark night and that somehow, impossibly, had walked into his actual life. She was wearing a dark sweater, simple and worn, but her eyes held something they had not held for months ago. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Mia set down her cup. The ceramic made a soft sound against the table. "I got promoted," she said. Her voice was steady now, nothing like the trembling whisper it had been that first night in the rain. "At the non-profit. They want me to lead the new trauma-informed training program for all the childcare workers. She paused. "It's the job I always wanted, Nicholas. The one I never thought I could have." He listened to every word. He always did. The way she spoke had changed over these 4 months. She no longer apologized for taking up space. She no longer made herself smaller. The woman who had served him coffee in a waitress uniform with bruises on her wrists had become someone who spoke about her own future like it mattered, like she mattered. "Tell me about it," he said. So she did. She talked about the children in her care, the foster kids who had known nothing but loss and fear. She talked about Sophie, a 5-year-old who had not spoken a single word when she first arrived, and who now sang while Mia braided her hair. She talked about Marcus, a 7-year-old who had been returned 3 times by families who could not handle his trauma response, and who now slept through the night because Mia sat beside his cot and read stories until his breathing steadied. Nicholas listened, and something moved in his chest. Something he had thought was permanently sealed off, locked away behind years of survival and ruthlessness and choices that could never be unmade. When Mia finished, the silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything unsaid. "Why did you really help me?" she asked finally. The question she had asked 100 times but never quite asked directly. "And don't tell me it was because you felt guilty about what happened with your brother. That's not the real answer, and you know it." Nicholas set down his cup. His hands were large, scarred across the knuckles. A gold watch caught the light on his left wrist, a Patek Philippe that cost more than Mia's entire year's old salary. He wore it the way some men wore a crown. Because when I watched you wrap your coat around Ava in that park, he said slowly, break your own wrist to protect her, I saw someone who chose differently than I did. Differently how? I chose survival, he said. Survival over the person I loved. My brother Marcus was my closest friend, Mia. He was the only person I trusted. And when he betrayed our family, sold everything to the Romanos for $2 million and a new name, I chose survival. I chose to find him, to make sure he could never do it again. He paused. His jaw was tight. I never spoke about what happened next, but Marcus never resurfaced. I was harder after that. Colder. I believed that mercy and survival were not compatible. That if you wanted to survive, you had to eliminate the threat. And when you saw me, I saw someone who chose love over survival. You threw yourself in front of a child who was not yours, broke bones you needed to work, risked everything because she mattered more than your own safety. He looked directly at her. I wanted to see what would happen if I chose differently this time. Mia's hands trembled slightly. She reached across the Formica table, and for the first time, she initiated contact. Her fingers found his scarred hand, and she held it. I'm not your redemption, Nicholas. I need you to understand that. I'm not the thing that erases what you've done. I know, he said. But maybe you're my reminder that there's more than one way to be strong. The rain intensified outside. The sound of it against the diner windows became a kind of music, persistent, steady, inevitable. I rebuilt my life, Mia said quietly. I have an apartment now. A real job. I have $5,000 in savings. I did that myself. I'm not asking you for anything. I don't need you to protect me anymore. Nicholas's expression shifted. Something in his eyes changed, became guarded. He was about to lose her. That was what he thought in that moment. She was about to walk away, back to a life that did not include him, back to a world where she was safe and small and separate. I understand, he said. His voice was careful, controlled. I'm not finished, she said. I don't need you to protect me. But I want you in my life anyway. Not as my savior. As my equal. Someone I choose to stand next to, not someone I'm dependent on. The tension in his shoulders released. He exhaled. Nicholas, I'm terrified, she continued. I'm terrified because I'm in love with you, and that shouldn't be possible. You're a mafia boss. I'm a woman who had $200 to her name for months ago. We're from different worlds. Every rational part of me knows this is dangerous. It is, he said. I am dangerous, Mia. The things I've done. I know what you are, she interrupted. I'm not naive. But I also know you knelt for me in a courtroom when you didn't have to. You gave me back my life. And every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for 4 months, you've shown up to this diner to drink terrible coffee and sit with me. That's not nothing. It's everything, he said. The confession came quietly, in a booth under fluorescent lights that made everything look like it was happening in a dream. I think I've been in love with you since I watched you wrap your coat around that child in the rain, Nicholas said. Since that moment, everything changed for me. Everything. I know, Mia said. I've known for a while. And? His voice was rough. Uncertain. This was a man who controlled everything, who moved through the world with absolute certainty, now uncertain in the face of one woman's answer. And I'm terrified, she said. But I'm also all in. I'm in love with you too, and I'm choosing to stay. They sat in silence. Their hands remained joined across the table. Rain streaked the windows. Neon light made the world look unreal and perfect and impossible and true all at once. Finally, Mia asked, so what happens now? Now, Nicholas said, we take it slow. Now we see if this works in daylight, not just in diners at 3 in the morning. Now we choose trust over fear. Can you do that? Mia smiled, and it transformed her entire face. I can do that. The rain continued its steady percussion against the diner windows. Two people who had learned to hide, who had learned survival the hard way, now learning something entirely different. Learning what it meant to choose love when fear made more sense. Learning what it meant to trust when trust had been used as a weapon against them before. Outside, Carlo stood in the rain, watching through the window. He saw his boss, the most powerful man in Boston, the man who had built an empire on ruthlessness, leaning across a diner table, completely undone by a woman with nothing but a prayer card and the kind of courage that refused to break. Carlo understood something in that moment that would change how he served Nicholas from that day forward. Some kinds of strength were stronger than any gun. Some kinds of power came from choosing mercy when survival said no. The diner's clock struck 4. Neither of them moved. Neither wanted to break the spell. 6 months later, the world had shifted. Nicholas stood in the doorway of the non-profit childcare center where Mia now worked, watching her with Sophie, the 5-year-old who had once refused to speak to anyone. Mia braided the girl's hair slowly, patiently, singing softly in a voice that carried all the tenderness she had learned to give. "Boss," Gino said quietly beside him, "you look at her the way normal people look at miracles." Nicholas did not take his eyes off Mia. "That's because she is one." Mia looked up, saw him, and smiled. She mouthed, "Stay." He did. Later that afternoon, they walked through Boston Common. The park where everything had changed for them, where Mia had caught Ava and broken her own wrist. The sun was warm for February. Patches of snow melted at the edges of the paths. "I need to tell you something," Nicholas said. "Okay." "The apartment you're living in. The trust fund. I paid for it. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." Mia stopped walking. "What?" "I couldn't let you go back to nothing," he said. "I couldn't. So I set it up through Carlo, through a non-profit trust. I wanted you to believe you had earned it yourself, because you had earned the right to rebuild your own dignity. That mattered to me." Mia processed this. A year ago, she would have felt trapped, resentful, dependent. Now, understanding the why, understanding that he had given her space to believe in herself even while he made sure she was safe, something inside her shifted. "I should be angry," she said finally. "I know. But I'm not. Because you gave me agency while keeping me safe. You let me become myself. That's love, Nicholas. That's actually what love is." They sat on a bench. The city sprawled around them, indifferent and beautiful. "I want you to meet someone," Nicholas said. "My daughter, Lucia. She's 7. I see her every weekend. She's the most important person in my life. I want you to meet her, if you're ready." Mia understood the weight of this. He was not just inviting her into his life. He was opening the most protected, most sacred part of it. His daughter. The one thing the Mafia world could not touch because he had kept her separate, kept her safe, kept her loved from a distance. "I'm ready," she said. 2 weeks later, at a playground in Cambridge, Mia knelt down to meet Lucia. The little girl was shy at first, dark-haired like her father, with his same intense eyes. Within minutes, Lucia was showing Mia the drawing she had brought, a picture of horses in a field, crayoned carefully in blues and greens and golds. "My dad said you like colors," Lucia said. "I made this for you." Mia's eyes filled with tears. She took the drawing like it was made of glass. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever been given." As they walked together, Nicholas, Mia, and Lucia, the playground fell away. The city fell away. There was only this, a man who had learned to choose mercy, a woman who had learned to choose trust, and a child who loved them both without needing to understand the scars that had brought them together. Every day we choose between fear and trust. Between closing ourselves off and opening our hearts. Mia Reynolds chose trust when she had every reason to choose fear. Nicholas Castellano chose mercy when his whole life had taught him survival. And in choosing differently, they found something neither expected, a love built not on need, but on seeing each other fully and choosing to stay anyway. If this story moved your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a like if you believe in second chances and new beginnings. Subscribe so you never miss another story about finding family in unexpected places. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening.